Okay. So today we are going to talk about inequality and especially the relationship between development and inequality. While talking about development, it's important to know that there are different types of development, like we've already covered. It's social development, economic development, environmental development, and so on. In this presentation, we are especially going to focus on economic development and social development and how that relates to inequalities. The relationship between inequalities and development can be very complex. Sometimes it's hard to say kind of what came first. Was it the inequality or equality that led to development, or opposite? So we'll have examples for both parts. Inequality means, you can go to the next, inequality means the quality of being unequal or uneven. This can mean social disparity, disparity of distribution or opportunity, lack of evenness, and so on. So that is the definition. That's what we're talking about.
Okay, so first we are gonna unpack how social disparities or like social factors can actually cause development. This is usually when these disparities are like discrimination, population, and culture. I'm gonna go deeper into them. What does this mean? So the social factor of discrimination is basically when societies get have like this cultural, like they are putting people in discrimination because of factors as their race, their gender, their ethnicity, their language, and all of that. And so how does this affect development? We're going to look at case studies after I explain each of them. Then we have population. So you will be asking, what do I mean by population? Basically, you know, this also connects to discrimination. You know how women tend to be like discriminated against, they don't get as much opportunities because of this lack of education, lack of resources about like for them to develop themselves in a society. So what happens? The thing is that because they grow up with the mentality that women cannot like should stay at home taking care of the children. If they don't get proper education, they just have more children. What happens is that these children don't really get the resources for health and education, and it just becomes a bigger population. And what happens is that the workers cannot actually sustain all these kids, and all these kids won't really grow to be a worker. So in that sense, the more population there is, the less development they might be. And then we have culture. So culture can actually have hidden effects in business, trade, and development. What this means is that depending on the culture is what it can also affect the development of the country or the state. Because if there is like an optimistic kind of really good relationships with proper with other countries and all of that, then it will have a good development. However, if they have the mentality of, oh, I'm a developing country, I cannot really have anything by myself, I need the help of others, then that will affect how they develop themselves. And if we go ahead, we'll see some case studies. So for each of these social factors, disparities I talk about, first we have Uganda. So what happened is that some years ago, Uganda had this regime in which they wanted all the Indians out of the state. The regime was about like a black supremacist in the country, bringing back like all the black ethnicity as a whole. And what this did was that they made in 90 days, all the Indians had to go away of the country. And so this was because of discrimination factors, especially of the authoritarian regime. They didn't want this kind of people. They were like, no. And so all these people had to go away to different countries. They had to go to bordering countries. They had to go to the UK. They had to go to United States, Canada. And then what happened was that this was around 50,000 people. And even they were owners of states. They were owners of like properties, cars, businesses. And so even though the state tried to like control everything and be like, oh, we're putting that into military, we're giving that to it, completely blunt their economy. Therefore, the development was paused, all because of the discrimination of taking people out of the country because they were not part of what they called their people. Similarly, what I talked before about population, some countries that women do not have like these opportunities of like working and educating themselves, they don't get resources, they have the opportunity, like they tend to stay at home taking care of the children in poor conditions, and they are not given the chance to actually, because the more the children, the less they can get more health and education for each of them. And so what happens is that there's more population and there's less development, as seen in this graph, in how like there's this prediction about like if you see the developing countries, the population goes higher. This is because like there's not enough education. However, in industrialized countries, the population tends to stay a little bit like it's not, the slope is not as high, because of how women are given proper opportunities for them to actually decide if they want to stay at home, have few children, educate them, or go into businesses and go into other career paths. And now with the cultural effect, we have China. So China in the Middle Ages was actually also a very like world proper developed country, like they were a war power. However, what happened is that during after a while, they got very proud of like their own culture and their values, and they closed their borders. Because of this, their economy kind of stopped and they didn't have like that much development. However, after a while, they opened up, and now we know them as the proper world power that they are. However, we can see now this in other countries like North Korea, with like how they like shutting themselves, even though there's a little bit of development, it cannot be called like a proper development of all the factors. Similarly, we got Afghanistan with the Taliban, like how the cultural values of staying like of the extreme Islamism is affecting the developing of the country.
Okay, so while Audrey talked about how social inequality or social disparity costs social development or development, I'm gonna flip it and talk about how development can lead to social equality or inequality. So while talking about social development, one of the factors taking into consideration when measuring social development is to what degree social inequality is happening in the country. So taking that into consideration, it's logical that if social development is increasing in a country, this also means that social inequality is decreasing. An example of this is Rwanda, where after the genocide, there was a change in government, or a change in leader. And this leader focused a lot on social development and developing the country. And as a result, we also see that social inequality have decreased a lot. For example, nearly 2/3 of its parliament seats and 52% of the cabinet positions are held by women. And this is one of the highest numbers in the whole world, also counting Western countries. So although this is the main case with social development, there are some exceptions when we measure economic development. One exception is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, although this is getting better, has been known for a long time to have a lot of social inequality, especially regarding women. But however, when we look at the economic development and GDP, which is one of the measurements for economic development, Saudi Arabia has one of the highest GDP in the world. So this is a counterclaim for development and equality coming together. Now we're going to go over to economic.
Yes, so I will be talking about how economic development affects inequalities positively or negatively?
So, thank you. Yes, as we can see in this picture, since we live in a capitalist world, mostly old white men have all the money, and a lot of the other population, is put into unequal situations. So, yes, therefore, it can be claimed that economic development, leads to inequalities. Because the bourgeoisie, the wealthy people or the wealthy actors in a state or globally that have the power over the production and have the power over resources actually exploit and exploit the proletariat, which is the group that is like the working class, basically. So on the global stage, this can also be seen in colonial or now post-colonial structures, where the Western countries and like Europe and Northern America exploits mostly developing and underdeveloped countries, by resources, by workforce, and through other factors. This map shows the world system theory, which puts all countries into three different groups. The core group, which are the rich countries, which exploit and which hold the most economic power, economic resources, and are exploiting the semi-periphery and periphery countries. So here in red, you can see the core countries, which is in Europe, Northern America, and also down here, Australia, New Zealand. Then the semi-periphery, which we also call the developing countries, which mostly is in Eastern Europe, China, India, and then in South America, you can also see them. And then the underdeveloped periphery countries, which is Africa, some in the Middle East and Southeast Asia, sorry. So can you go to next? This explains the world system theory very well, as the core exploits the periphery and the semi-periphery, and they need to provide the resources and work. And there are two case studies that show this system very well. Firstly, the mica mines in India, where under horrible conditions, under like human rights violations, the mica is put out of the mines, which are the resources which are like glittery. So in the core countries, they can get sold for like makeup, for example. So in the semi-periphery country, India, the resource gets, how is it?
Exported.
Yeah, gets exported to, for example, China, which is also a semi-periphery country, which there it gets produced into products, which then gets sold in core countries. And actually only the core countries get a big benefit from that, since the companies that sell it are based in core countries. Moreover, another case study could be the cobalt mines in Congo, which provides cobalt, which is very important for electronic devices. So then the cobalt gets shipped to a semi-periphery country, most prominently China, where it gets then produced and then shipped to core countries. And at the end, again, only the core country economies actually get profit from that. So therefore, we can see that economic development on the global scale is leading to inequalities in the semi-periphery and periphery countries. However, also on the national scale, the
That can be seen in the distinction between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, as there are only some actors within the state which actually get more richer. However, the working class is not get care of, or has no more rights, and gets actually exploited with their working force. Yes.
Okay, so as Lena spoke really well about capitalism, so I'm going to talk about capitalism and new Marxism. And then world system theory. So Lena spoke about capitalism and world system theory, but right now I'm going to speak about the new Marxist critique to capitalism. Before understanding the new Marxist critique, I think it's very important to first look at what was the capitalistic critique to Marxism. So that, and then we'll also be diving into a little bit of economics to understand it better. So first and foremost, the critique of capitalism, the Marxist critique of capitalism says that it critiques about the competitiveness nature of capitalism, the accumulation of wealth, which is, for example, there is like, small percentage of people who holds a large amount of wealth. But what if I said like the theory of capitalism that was invented or that was proposed by Karl Marx has failed? Because in the book of development, a Marx book, which is Das Kapital, he speaks about 5 stages of development. And then just moving on forward, in the 4th stage he describes is a 4th stage basically describes is that capitalism, and then the 5th stage he describes is as socialism. Socialism where all the wealth and everything is equally distributed and all the wealth is in the hands of government. But we have seen that it has not worked in real life. So the theory of Karl Marx has not worked in real life. That has given an extension to Marxism, which is the new Marxist approach. So since Marxism has been critiquing the capitalistic nature, the competitiveness of the market, now the whole traditional Marxism has failed, and until now, that has given rise to new Marxism, whereas the new Marxism is actually doing something specific. They are targeting the monopolistic and oligopolistic firms. So monopolistic and oligopolistic firms are basically firms, monopolistic firms are basically firms which have no competition, which have less competition. And then even oligopolistic firms are also firms that has like very few or like 2 or 3 competitors with them. So what does these new Marxist thinkers want? They want from the government, they want the government to intervene in the market and reduce the accumulation of wealth in the hands of monopolistic firms, like the big firms. Let's say, for example, there are so many firms, like for example, Google, Microsoft, and all this. They hold, and some of the thinkers have even said, like for example, some of the companies in the world hold around like 50% of the wealth. So the neo Marxist thinkers wants the government to intervene and to actually break down these companies so that they don't hold the accumulation of wealth, they don't hold the amount of wealth. So this is a case study of monopolies and a specific sector of US, that is the health sector in US. So there was this study done by Henry Simons. He's a leader in economics at the University of Chicago, and Thurman Arnold, the assistant attorney general. They kind of analyzed how monopolies have increased inequality in the economy and how they are silently spreading poverty. So they have emphasized on specifically the health sector in United States. What they have mentioned is that not a single highly competitive hospital market remains in any region of the United States. And according to the commission, the most 90% of the sector is basically being operated by monopolistic firms. Like the big firms are taking control of much of the sector, much of the health sector. According to their studies, what they have mentioned is like a recent study that was done along with them by Yale economist Zach Cooper and others. They found out that if you stay in a hospital that focuses no competition, as in like if you stay in a hospital that is a hospital which is not facing any competition, as there are no competitors behind. For example, let's take, there is a cancer hospital, like there is a hospital which is treating patients with cancer. If that's the only hospital in the region, or let's say in United States, then it has the power to actually charge more. And they have analyzed it, and they have said that if you stay in a hospital that faces no competition, your bill will be $1,900 higher on average than if you stay in a hospital facing 4 or more competitors. So this is one of the factors that they've analyzed and said that is leading to more inequality, because it's affecting the poor more. It's actually making poor and completely shifting the incidence and the burden towards the poor sector of the economy. So what? Yeah, this was one of the case studies. But so what do they want basically in the forefront, how to deal with it? Like there have been many situations. Okay, the government should intervene to stop this. For example, if there is a big company, either they should put a minimum wage, or a minimum wage where the government says to the firms that okay, you can charge this much, or you can charge this much. Or what the government could do, this can be a counterclaim, what the US did with its entertainment firm. So it actually regulated something called as the anti-monopoly regulation. So Disney was a big monopolistic firm. It had like everything merged, like many of the things that these all companies wanted to broadcast and all that. It took a lot of it, and then it kind of took much of the power in its hand, and that's how it accumulated a lot of wealth. And all these companies went into like loss, and then it was also affecting, and it was also charging higher price for the people who wants to have entertainment. So what the government did, what the United States government did, is basically it regulated anti-monopoly regulation, where it actually divided, or like made this firm, or like actually divided it into small firms, whereas this is not going to be the big firm anymore. They have kind of they have kind of broken down into pieces, where other firms and these firms have more competition between them, and then that could lead to lowering the prices of for poor, and they can access it. This was an example of something that's not a necessity for the people. Entertainment is of course not a necessity, but the United States still has a big role to play in necessities, like for example the household, which is also considered a big monopoly market in the United States, and then similarly as health sectors. So going forward with implementing the anti-monopoly regulation in necessities, like for example health sectors, education sectors, and even the housing sectors and all that, much work needs to be done. Although there will be some kind of rage from the companies, because they wouldn't want to lower their prices. That would be one of the cause and effect if the United States comes up to this thing. So this is how monopolistic firms kind of eat up the wealth from other companies, and then through their market power they increase the prices, and this leaves a very burdenful impact on the poor economic class. Yeah, thank you. I hope it was understandable.
Okay. So to conclude, we had a lot of case studies both on social, economic, and some political developments. I think the way to conclude is that in most cases, it seems like there is a max amount of development, and if someone will develop, this automatically means that someone will development will decrease. So this both go in a national level, where if rich people get richer, this means that poor people will get poorer, and also on a global scale with the world system theory, that if rich countries get richer, this will also mean that poor countries get poorer. One big exception for this might be with social development. If you look at solely social development and the factors of, because one of the factors is social inequality. So then they need to factor that into development measurement. So this also would depend on how you measure development if you take inequality into consideration. But overall, I think that is the conclusion. And now I think we can go on to answering the question.